Welcome to the kingdom. I'm Chris, and this is Good Enough Gaming. Well, howdy, folks, and welcome back to this episode of the Line of Sight podcast. My guest today is Justin, who is the brains behind Haunt's Wargaming. I've been looking forward to this. So, Justin, thanks for joining us on the channel today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So let's, I'm sure anybody who plays One Page Rules is pretty well familiar with you and your channel by this point, but just in case, tell me a little bit about how you got into Wargaming.
I got into it around second edition 40K, but it was just very briefly. And I had a very long hiatus. And then I got back into it maybe about like 6 years ago. The tail end of 8th edition 40K.
Okay. And then, so 40K was your first foray into it. Did you try any other games in the interim, or is it mostly a 40K person until OPR came around?
Yeah, I mainly got back into it to kind of meet people. I kind of prefer people one-on-ones, and I thought this would be a good hobby to get into to do that. So, yeah, that's mainly why I got into the hobby, honestly.
So, well, I mean, that's one of the benefits is I know a lot of folks who do mini wargaming, myself included, we're kind of introverted. So we do want social interaction, but usually, like you said, more one-on-one setting. Like walking into a big crowd is sometimes a bit overwhelming, but the idea of just one person across the table playing that's good. So then, how did you discover One Page Rules?
Yeah, kind of the traditional way that people discover one-page rules. I kind of got a little irritated with 40K and the way they run things, the constant churn of rules and whatnot, and started looking for alternatives.
Did someone introduce it to you, or like you said, you just were Googling alternatives to 40K and it popped up?
I'm pretty sure I found them on Google, and then I ended up getting some other people into it.
So, around where you live, is there a pretty big OPR community, or is it like a fairly small group?
Well, see, the thing is, I kind of live in a dead zone. Like the closest place for me to go is about 45, 50 minutes away. So I don't really get out there too much, but
Okay.
there are some people in the area, but not like a huge amount of people. Yeah.
Well, then that actually be a great first question to ask you about on that vein. I actually have talked to several people on these interviews who are in a similar situation as you. They may live in a small town or they live further out, and so there isn't necessarily a local gaming store really close where they can play and find a ready-made community. So you did a video about the solo gaming one-page rules, playing the single player using those AI rules. How did that work out? Did you find that was a decent experience? That was a good way to get your gaming fix in if you couldn't arrange it with someone else? Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, it's, if that's your only option, it works. I think some people would probably like it more than others. For me personally, there are some other games I think I would prefer to try out, but I haven't yet. But yeah, One Page Rules solo isn't too bad.
What are some of those other games? I mean, I've actually find there's a lot bigger solo gaming going on than I was ever aware of. When I first interviewed, I think it was ULC Battle Reports. He's same situation as you, so he actively seeks out games designed for single players. So, what are some of the other ones you found that you want to try out?
Yeah, I'd really like to try out Stargrave and Frostgrave and Rangers of Shadow Deep, just to name a few.
I've heard of Stargrave and Frostgrave. I've tried Frostgrave. I really like that. Great mix of RPG and tabletop. And I imagine Stargrave is very similar. I'm not familiar with that. What did you say? Rangers of Shadow Deep?
Yeah, I think that's what it's called.
Okay, I'll have to look that one up there. So then let's see here. Well, I guess the other question, and I know I am, at least maybe I'm sure some other YouTubers are, you are officially partnered with One Page Rules. In fact, just was it yesterday? You had a video coming out for the last tier. And I mean, the campaign for that just started today, and you're already able to try out the rules and stuff. How did you, if you can, how did you become a partner of One Page Rules?
I honestly, I think I was just in the right place at the right time. I started putting out battle reports for them. And I think one of the big things was I was using their models to play their games, which at the time, not a lot of people were doing.
I definitely. I know the first of your battle reports that I think I ever saw was for, oh, what was it? It was Secrets of Ishal. And yes, I do notice that you used the specific One Page Rules models, because I think most folks come over to One Page Rules from 40K. I know I do. I don't have very many OPR models, and so they're bringing pre-made stuff. So do you 3D print all of those? Do you have someone else do that for you?
Yeah, I did the 3D printing.
Which what printer do you use, and what resin? I noticed you had a couple videos using that. Have you found like a nice mix of a decent resin that works without being too expensive?
Yeah, I use an Anycubic Photon Mono 2 currently. It's a pretty small printer. It would be nice to have one size up if I could fit it, but print at home, you're kind of limited on space.
Oh yeah, I absolutely know. I don't know if you ever seen much War Boss Fits, but he's basically like crowded himself out of his own garage with how much stuff he's printed. What kind of resin did you use?
I use ABS-like, water washable, also by Anycubic. It's called V2.
And so I use some of the water washable. Maybe the ABS is the thing I'm missing. It works. It's very easy to get off the build plate, but I found it super fragile. One of the first armies I printed was Mummified Undead, very similar to the one you did, and almost all of the archers' bows have snapped just from me picking them up out of boxes and stuff. Is the ABS stuff a little stronger?
Yeah, compared to some of the other resins I've used, I think it's pretty decent. But yeah, the particular model that you're printing, like if it has a really thin part, that's probably going to break.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the one advantage that plastic or I suppose you could also buy some of the really expensive resins, but at that point, you're almost just paying plastic price. So then I was going to ask you, because you are an official partner with One Page Rules and you get stuff a little bit ahead of time, if you can tell me, I don't know if you can. Have you been able to get some of the new PVC minis that they're releasing with their new Game Found campaign?
I have not.
Not
I'd,
yet.
I'd
Not
like
yet.
some.
I was gonna say I was really hoping you'd say yes, and I was gonna be like, well, tell us about them. But all right, well, I guess we'll scratch that question off there. But still, you had a video, and this was something that I talked about in one of my own recent videos. So One Page Rules, I think one of the reasons it's taken off the way it has, the model agnostic, but then they also provide their own models that you can 3D print, and yet now they're getting into plastic production game. Just as someone who has worked both with plastic and 3D printing and all that, where do you think they're going with this? Are they going to try and balance 50-50? Do you think they're going to shift one to the other? What do you think?
I think they just want to see how it goes before they make any big decisions. But yeah, getting into physical stores would be nice for them, I'm sure.
I'm excited for it. I do 3D printing, but I haven't had nearly the success that other people have. Like I said, the one army, I printed an entire mummified undead army, and unless the pieces were very fat, banners, a lot of banners have broken, a lot of bows have broken. So I'm curious because on the one hand, I definitely want them to make those kind of plastic prints, but at the same time, I'm wondering how that's going to balance with their ability to sell or to produce the other stuff. They said in their recent live stream that they're still going gung ho on the 3D printing side, but I'm very curious where they're going to go with the plastic stuff. Okay, so then the other thing I noticed that your channel is super popular for. In fact, your top I think it's your top 10 videos. You do a lot of homemade terrain. So, did you start doing homemade terrain when you started doing wargaming, or did that come along a bit later?
Yeah, I can't say exactly when along the journey, but I did start making terrain after I got into wargaming.
Did it start with smaller pieces? Because you have some pretty big projects. You make like massive factories, modular city sets. Was it? Did you like come up with an idea for it and then build it, or do you just play a game and you think, you know what, I really need one of these, and then you go build one?
It's not one thing I would say, and I did maybe like 2 or 3 projects before I started doing them for videos.
And then, uh, just roughly, how many different sets have you created? Like you have desert stuff, you've got city stuff. I mean, I imagine you have quite a few collections of terrain there. How long you been? I guess my question is, how long have you been building your own terrain?
About 3, 4 years, I would say. Yeah.
And how long? Obviously, it'll change depending on the type of project. But when I watched, for example, the where you made that modular city terrain, that looked super involved. And then I was really surprised to find when I watched one of your other videos about painting how you'd said you weren't really big into that area of the hobby. And I thought that's very curious. He's willing to take styrofoam and popsicle sticks and all this stuff and make this really good looking terrain, but the painting side just didn't appeal to you as much. Any idea why one element of building and painting really grabs you and the other one doesn't?
I think I've changed my attitude on that a bit. Since I paint so much up for OPR, I've gotten better at it over time, and I think that kind of makes it a more enjoyable process when you're actually practicing.
I definitely say that. In fact, I think a lot of people when they start off, that's one of the big like learning curves is painting things. So would you say you spend more time when you're in the hobby side of it, building new terrain or painting up new armies?
The OPR sponsorship has been very demanding as far as like painting stuff up, and that has taken up a lot of my free time. So the train's kind of fallen onto the back burner, if you will.
Okay. Okay. So
I do
then,
enjoy making terrain.
well, I mean, if none of you listening have seen, go watch one of Justin's terrain. I mean, I've made styrofoam terrain before that was really crappy. I basically took it as is, spray painted it gray, tried to add some, elements to make it. I mean, it looked pretty bad. Whereas the one I watched, you carved out the basic shape, but then you made sure it was filled so it was solid and strong and it had some weight. Like they're pretty quality. So anyone who's looking to learn how to make terrain, I would definitely say go check out some Hans tutorials because you also have not just complicated stuff like buildings and modular terrain, but I think your most popular video ever was just making simple basic hills, if I'm
Yeah,
not
it's
mistaken.
yeah, it's kind of crazy how many views that one has gotten.
330,000. I mean, that's absolutely insane. But when did you start the channel?
I about like 3.5 years ago.
So I think part of it was you were making something that people needed. People need basic terrain, and I mean, modular hills that look good, that's a staple to any table. And you were able to release that at the time when the whole world was locked into their houses and people suddenly needed hobbies. So you were like you said with the OPR sponsorship, you were the right place at the right time and kaboom from there. So good on you for that.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy because I literally posted one battle report, and that's all it took for them to like contact me.
Well, I mean, it's a solid bat rep. You have good camera angles and lighting, and you're using their models, and your paint jobs are decent. Like they looked at it and they said, "Well, there's not a whole lot we have to do else here other than just make a partnership." So, I mean, that's really cool. So then, when you are making the terrain, would you say, like, based on what you're expected to do for one page rules, do you make terrain to kind of fit that? Like, for example, you're doing the last tier. So you need to create terrain to match that, or do you kind of take the terrain you already have and try and make do with it based on the models that you're working with?
For the last tier, I had to make a modular river, so I did do that for that specifically, but I wanted one anyway. but usually I just make whatever I feel like making.
And that river, are you gonna? I'm sorry, I didn't see if there already was one. Does that river? Do you have a video on how to make it?
No, I haven't made that yet.
I haven't made it yet, but it's in the works. Because I looked at it, and for a second, I thought you had the battlefield in a box. It looked like that you had simply added onto and improved. But then I thought, there's no way with all the other terrain this guy makes that he bought a battlefield in a box stuff as a base set. I'm like, I'll bet he made that from scratch. So obviously now I know you did.
Yeah, it's a
So
nine.
no, go
It's
ahead.
a
Sorry.
sorry. It's a 19 piece set.
How long did that take you?
I mean, I wasn't keeping track of the time. A lot of it was drying time, so maybe 10 hours. That's a guess.
Okay. And then you have from what it looks like, you probably have like a dedicated workspace, because you were saying some of the stuff you use is, chemicals and fumes, and I can't imagine you're doing it in your kitchen table.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually converted the laundry room into a kind of like a fume booth.
No, I mean, that's a great. I have to when I do 3D print, I have this battle I have to fight, because my 3D printer's in the same room as my home office. But the smell, even with the fans that are supposed to filter out some of the smell, it's so bad. But if I open the windows, it changes the temperature in the room so drastically, and the prints always fail. So to have a dedicated venting space would probably be a pretty good idea there.
Yeah, I actually did a video on that too. I set up like I split my laundry line, the dryer line, and then I fed it into a cabinet, and that's where I have my 3D printer.
Oh, who was it? There was, I think it's a company in Spain that did a similar thing. They took a bookshelf that had cabinet doors, drilled a hole in the back, and then just funneled that out a window so they could print stuff and do it out there. I thought of doing that, but I only have one window, and it's just in a not a great place. Um, so still on this idea of making your own terrain, building your own stuff and all that. One of your videos, you'd said that you had studied fine arts. So and that informs, that helps you with building the terrain. Tell me a little more with that. Were you like working in stage production or something, and you're like, hey, I can do this, but only smaller?
It's mostly from high school. I did a lot of classes in high school on pretty much everything, a lot of sculpting, a lot of 2D stuff. And I did digital art as like a major in college, but that never really went anywhere.
But you still carry it over into your channel, so obviously that I mean, obviously it paid off in the end for sure.
Yeah, and I ran an Etsy store for a little while where I was making masks.
Oh,
So
okay.
that was kind of also a sculpting related thing.
Have you ever thought of starting to sell your terrain on Etsy? I bet you would get a lot of buyers.
Yeah, I have thought about that.
So then I know the few times that I've tried building my own terrain, it was mediocre at best. If someone though was really dead set, they want to make a tabletop that's all their stuff, their painted models, their painted terrains. What would be some projects you would recommend for someone just getting into the terrain building? That could be like some ways to ease into it.
Simple runes. That's probably the best starter project.
And what kind of tools or materials? So someone's totally new to this, and they say, I want to build, let's say, a small building, a set of hills, some rocks, something like that. They go to Home Depot. What do they need to come away with?
It depends how much work you want to put into it, I guess. I usually use like a poster board for that. You could also use, I don't know, you could use that like that, geez, sorry, you could use cardboard.
And you accumulate stuff over, like, it looks like you're able to keep a lot of the materials you you have from other projects and stuff. So how often do you actually have to go buy new stuff, or how often do you just have everything laying around to build with?
Yeah, I've accumulated quite a bit of crafting supplies, but I mean, usually I'll have to stop by Home Depot just to get some glue or something.
Okay.
I have
Now,
most of the stuff on hand though, if I need it.
I imagine it's like most folks, once that, when you get into the hobby, there's that learning curve. Even if you never build terrain, if you paint, you got to get brushes, you got to get paints, you got to get all that. And then once you've been doing it for a while, you just kind of maintain this level of materials that you replace as you lose it. So then jumping back a bit, so you started up the channel a few years ago. What made you decide to do that?
Um, I had started a few other YouTube channels and they didn't really go anywhere. Honestly, I just want to do something more creative. I was hoping to do this full time, but I'm not sure if it's going to happen or not at any point.
I think that's probably every YouTuber's dream, is to be able to do it full time. I mean, you never know. Your channel's been up for 3 years. I don't know. Did you watch a lot of like battle reports and stuff on YouTube when you were still playing 40K?
Uh, when I was playing 40K, I would mostly just look at the lists that people were playing. I was kind of obsessed with trying to figure out what lists people were playing, and I wouldn't really watch the rest of the battle report.
No, I can appreciate that. I liked watching to see one, the paint jobs, because I love seeing the stuff people come up with paint jobs, and
Yeah,
then
that
like
too.
what were people running? And to kind of differentiate between what's a super competitive list between a more casual one. But the whole reason I mentioned that is one of the channels I used to watch quite a bit was Winter's SEO. Now he's still obviously he's still very much doing 40K stuff. But when I was started watching him, that was over 10 years ago, and he said the same kind of thing. He says, I would love to do this full time, and now I think he actually is. So I don't know. Don't count yourself out yet. Your channel's doing pretty well. You got, I think it's around a little over 16,000 subscribers. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it could happen.
Just have to keep plugging away at it. So you did mention that because your partnership with OPR, you said it's pretty demanding. I imagine you have to print out the armies, produce certain content in a certain timeline. Does that leave you much time to play other games?
Not really, to be honest. Like, well, I was saying, I'm pretty far away from any of my local stores, so that alone is kind of a big barrier for me just to get out and like go to a store, spend like an hour and a half driving on like a Wednesday. That's tough for me to do.
And I imagine, or at least I know from a lot of the viewers that make comments on my channel, I hear a lot of the same. Is a 3 hour round trip just to get in an hour or two of gaming. That's kind of a hard sell. If you could, let's just imagine, let's say a good game store opens in your town, and you do. What games would you be interested in trying out?
Like I was saying before, Frostgrave, Stargrave. I wouldn't mind playing some Star Wars Legion. I've been into that, but I haven't kept up to date with the rules since I'm pretty sure they've changed the rules quite a bit since the last time I played that.
Yeah, it seems, unfortunately, that's. I mean, I don't mind if a company changes its rules. It's good, they refresh it. One page rules now is going to be doing it. They used to do it every 6 months. But the thing that bothers me is they change the rules, but if the rules aren't free, then that's where I start to get a little iffy. Like, are you changing the rules because they need it, or are you changing the rules because the bottom line needs it? So that kind of, I could definitely see that there. Do you find yourself drawn more to skirmish level stuff or bigger battle stuff?
It's a bit of both. I'd also really like to play some Trench Crusade. I did
Ah,
get a
yeah.
Yeah, I got the Heretic Legion starter set for that.
Yeah, in fact, almost everybody that I've been interviewing for the last probably 3 or 4 interviews have all said, "Oh yeah, I'm really interested in Trench Crusade." Like you, I backed the new Antioch. I really liked the way those particular models looked, and I might start watching your videos a little more closely because I have no trench terrain, like nothing. So I bought into the Trench Crusade terrain where you print those little side pieces that you attach to, I think it's 4 centimeter foam board. So do you have plans then to build a modular trench system?
I would love to do that. I just haven't had the time.
I mean, that's kind of the mantra for wargaming in general. All these great ideas, but trying to come up with the time to do it would be is always a difficult one. Well, I mean, I will definitely be keeping an eye out on your channel for once we start getting our minis and such to see what we come up with there. So then, speaking of upcoming stuff, what that you can tell us about, what are some things coming up on your channel that we can kind of look forward to?
Are you familiar with Grave Trigger?
I'm not. Tell me about it.
It's a game we're working with the creator to put out a battle report, possibly 2 battle reports, early mid-March. It's a skirmish game, kind of where you take control. I'm not terribly familiar with the lore, but you're basically playing people who are commanding these drives, quote unquote. They're kind of like super monsters.
Okay. Most so sci-fi setting then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it
And
kind of
is
reminds me of like Resident Evil.
oh well, you
I
just
think
got
they're
my
going for
attention
like
there.
Berserk as well.
Okay. Is it oh man, I know I just lost my train of thought there. That happens to the best of us. I'm getting old anyways.
No
So okay, oh
problem.
that's what I was going to ask. Um I'm guessing dice based, 6d6, d10, d12. What are the mechanics like?
No, actually, it doesn't use dice, and it
Oh,
has yeah. It's kind of like you place a token where you're gonna move the character, and everybody puts their tokens out at the same time, and then they're kind of revealed in sequence, and the sequence can be altered. There's a lot to the rules. I haven't read through them all yet, so I don't want to say too much about them.
sure, sure. So did the writer reach out to you and say, "Hey, I see you have a channel. I'm interested in this game. Would you like to plan it?" Or was this somebody that you knew? How'd you find it?
Yeah, he reached out to me maybe like a year and a half ago because this the launch has been pushed back a couple times now. But yeah, it's looking like it's going to launch in early March.
Okay, awesome. So folks can look forward to then a new game. With is it model agnostic, or are they releasing a model line to go with it?
There is a model line. I'm sure you could use your own models if you want, but it is going to be sold in a kit. So if you buy the kit, you're going to get the models with it.
Now, does that mean you're now going to have to start printing and painting up models for that at the same time as keeping up with one-page rules?
No, it's a smaller army than most one-page rules games. Like it's just 3 per side in the starter kit.
Oh, okay. Well, that's definitely a lot more manageable. 3 per side
Yeah,
rather
it's not too
than
bad.
because even a skirmish game of one-page rules, you usually got about 5 or 6, depending on what army you're playing. You play something like Human Defense Force and go heavy troops, you can have probably 20 on the table there. All right, cool. So we got Trench Crusade coming up in the future. We have this additional new game that's going to launch coming up into the future. Do you have a terrain project you're working on right now that folks can look for? You said you just finished a river. Anything? What's next on the menu for terrain?
I'm actually not quite finished with the river. I want to add some grass to it possibly yet, and I got a little work to do on that one yet. So I haven't really thought too much about what I'm going to do next. I usually don't plan too far ahead with my terrain projects.
Okay. So let's see what I was going to ask here. Well, you already answered what terrain is good to kind of start with. Some rocky stuff that's easy to build and paint. That the river, on a level of 1 being very basic, easy to make terrain, and 10 being super complex. Don't try this unless you're experienced. Where did the rivers fall? Where would you say those fall as far as complexity and difficulty?
I didn't do any resin pours or anything, so I would say that it's more of like a 5, maybe somewhere around middle.
So what did you do for the water effects then? One thing I've always noticed, there's either you pour the stuff that eventually levels out and you get like a still water effect, but to get more of a agitated water, I don't know. I've never actually worked with it. I've been fascinated how people can somehow get the effect of rushing or surging waves in a still model. How do you do that?
It's my first time trying it, and I think it turned out all right. I used an airbrush to create like a gradient underneath, and then I painted some gloss Mod Podge on top of that. I did 2 layers with this one. I probably could have done a third just to make it look a little thicker, but yeah, it does create a pretty convincing effect of a river.
Okay.
And to put that on, I was kind of stippling it on with a brush, and that creates a fairly convincing effect.
Okay. I mean, anyone who's, if you're making your own terrain or board, you at some point you got to have some kind of water effects in there. I mean, you got to have rivers to break up borders and stuff. I find a river in a game makes it very effective because you suddenly have this massive barrier. Every game everyone plays on, it's always open field. You can walk anywhere, you can go anywhere. Throw a river down on the field, and suddenly you really have to rethink tactics. That is, if you run it as impassable or something like that. Okay, outstanding. So, let me see here. We've talked about upcoming projects. We've talked about what it's like working with one-page rules. Any last? I mean, we're getting actually close to our time limit here. So, any other words of wisdom for like new people getting into the hobby, people watching your videos about terrain building or one-page rules? Any last parting words of wisdom?
Um,
Like new
that's a.
players. One thing. Well, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I was going to say that's a broad spectrum of things. That's a broad spectrum of things to choose from.
It's yeah, absolutely it is. But with one page rules growing, we're getting a lot of new people in. Some are coming from other gaming systems, but actually the gaming group that I've got around where I live, a lot of them they're fairly new to wargaming in general. Um, what have you ever introduced anyone into the game, or had to teach someone, bring them in from out in the cold, so to speak?
Yeah, just one, but he's more of a casual wargamer.
But still, it's bringing someone into a game. I mean, teaching someone a war game. It's, I mean, there's an art to it or so. So to new people who are just getting into the hobby, what's something you would recommend? Because they'll watch like one of your videos and they'll see your terrain, they'll see your models, and that's a lot of work and that's a lot of talent there. What's something you would tell them as encouragement to stick with it?
I would just say try not to go overboard and get too many models. Just stick to a small force. Get that force painted.
Baby steps, huh? I
Yeah.
think it. No, absolutely. I know. I've been watching or just keeping tabs on the Ranger program and some of the upcoming events, and a lot of the events that are being posted I'm seeing are slow grow campaigns, casual stuff, which is really good. I know there's a burgeoning competitive scene. Are you much of a competitive player?
Yeah, I could get competitive if I had competitive people to play with. I'm sure I would enjoy that.
Rise up, match them there. Okay. Well, we've got like the competitive scene's growing. I don't know if you've ever watched or talked with Daniel from Nexus Wargaming. He's really big into the competitive side of it. He likes to do list analyses, and he went to that first tournament way out in London, and so it's there. It's growing, but I think casual is how we're going to bring in a lot of new folks and new players to the game. All right, awesome. So, thanks again for joining me. For everyone listening, this has been Justin from Haunts Wargaming. Make sure you go check out his channel, both for the latest, and I mean the cutting edge latest of one page rule stuff. He'll have it before anybody else does. and also for some great basic terrain tutorials, how to make everything from landscaping things to buildings and so on and so forth. So thanks again, Justin, for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time this evening to have a chat with me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
And for everybody else, we will see you next month on the Line of Sight podcast. Until then, keep your dice on the table, and we'll see you on the next one.